If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined by my good friend Randy Nance from my home state of Texas, Green Beret extraordinaire. Randy's one of our heroes, combat wounded vets. He hates it when I say that, but since I'm the CEO, I get to say these things. We appreciate everything you did over there, Randy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, it doesn't get said near often enough for you guys.
Well, you were worth it.
You know, that's funny you should say that. Thank you. When I sent Doc Pete, I said thank you to him on Memorial Day. Do you know what he texted me back? Exactly what you just said. He said, you're worth it. It's the first time that a vet had said that to me, and it kind of hit me right in the gut. It was a gut punch just to hear him say that. So I appreciate that, Randy. We definitely.
I've not heard Doc Pete say it. You know, I started saying it probably a couple of years ago because all this time I always thought to say you're welcome, or I don't know, it just seemed like there should be something else. It was kind of, and then like even this last earlier this year when I went to the Masters, I got to go for those couple of days. That that's what I told everybody there. And of course, after we did our little powwow and the whole thing was over at the end, it was amazing to me how many people mentioned that that was the first time they'd heard anybody say that. So it's going around now, and I'm glad, because if somebody's going to take the time to thank you for your service and what you did, you know what I mean? They were definitely worth it. Otherwise, they wouldn't thank you.
Yeah, it's a powerful statement at the end of the day. Like I said, it caught me off guard when Doc Pete said that. So, but I do appreciate everything, Randy. You know that.
Absolutely.
You're good, man. You're nothing but a treasure to this country. That's for sure. Lots of people don't have your level of bravery. I can just imagine, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, because you're new to Survival Dispatch or Survival Dispatch News, Randy was blown up by an IED 2006 in Baghdad, extensive burns to his body, lost one of his legs. And what did he do? Like a typical Green Beret, he came back and he started doing tough mutters and everything else that people with two legs have a hard time doing. So, all right, well, we'll move on from there. Tonight, it's a slightly different topic. And again, we've been having some discussions as far as returning to a certain extent, Survival Dispatch returning to its roots and discussing prepper and survival related stuff relative to whatever's at the top of the news cycle that we're discussing. So tonight, Randy and I are going to have a conversation on the explosion in preppers in particular. And there's a big difference between preppers and survivalists. As preppers, a lot of it is acquiring goods, acquiring stock in whatever, ammo, food, etc., and stacking it up, whereas survival, I had a guy tell me, Randy, tell me what you think of this. So he was a spec ops guy, much like yourself, went through SEER training, etc. He said that there were probably under, I think it was 0.3% of Americans that you could drop in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the clothes on their back that would be able to survive and, fend for themselves as a survivalist. And I'd be surprised actually if it's even that high, to be quite honest with you, because we're talking about skills that have been long since lost, right? And this particular guy, by the way, would take a couple river rocks and smash them against each other until he had what looked like a caveman knife. And then he could use that knife when he got game, so he could process whatever the game was to eat it, and he could clean the hide and all that sort of stuff. It definitely skills that most of us don't know anything about, myself included. So anyway, we're going to discuss this explosion in preppers, the effects that that's had, the ironic growth of woke progressive preppers, which has happened. I've watched it happen over the course of the past few years. But I think one of the points Randy and I really want to drive home tonight, it's good to see the prepper community in general grow, regardless of political affiliation. The downside to it is, and there's a handful of downsides, but one of them is we have a whole bunch of, call it new preppers who are self-proclaimed experts, and they put information out on the interwebs. And I'm not saying that they have bad intentions or anything like that, but we're going to go through a number of, call it urban legends, that are promoted by some people in the prepper / survival community. We're going to talk about some of the most important things that you should be focusing on. And I'll say this for the umpteenth time since I acquired Survival Dispatch, we're not doomsday preppers. What we are is realists, in that you should be prepping for the thing that's most likely to happen wherever you're located. So in other words, if you live here in the Southeast like I do, you live in the Gulf Coast, hurricanes are the thing that you should be prepping for above and beyond everything else. If you live in the Midwest, you should probably be prepping for things like tornadoes, hailstorms, those sort of things. And if you live in, let's say, Southern California, clearly you should be prepping for wildfires. If you live in the Northeast, you should be prepping for crazy winter storms. I mean, we had one in Buffalo a couple of years ago where a bunch of people died on the freeway because the snow was so deep, they couldn't get any further in their cars. And when the snow piled up and they were trying to stay warm in their cars, they didn't know that they needed to go remove the snow around the tailpipe, and the carbon monoxide ended up killing them. I mean, absolutely terrible, unfortunate stuff. But again, the key thing to this is you should be prepping for the thing that's most likely to happen. And a lot of prepping revolves around food. And at the end of the day, you're going to eat the food one way or the other. So it's not like you're betting on a horse that's never going to come in. However, before we dive into tonight's topic, we're going to hit the conflicted question here. So let me get it pulled up on screen. I didn't get it pulled up last night. I was on a different screen, Randy, and I thought I had it pulled up and I thought wrong. So, all right, here we go. And this is an interesting one tonight, by the way. So one of your friends tells you that he can't live in this world anymore. Now, keep in mind, the conflicted questions are all about being in some sort of post-apocalyptic scenario, end of the world, whatever you want to call it, Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it. So keep that in mind for the perspective. So one of your friends tells you he can't live in this world anymore, and he has confessed to you that he wants to commit suicide. Talks with his wife and kids who are still alive and depend on him seem to do nothing to change his mind. The children are too young and his wife too depressed to be of any help with this situation. As the leader of your group, what would you do with this member and his family? That's a conundrum right there, Randy. I mean,
yes, it is.
We'll
Our situation.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll ponder it, and Randy and I will answer that question as best as we can at the end of this episode. So hang with us for that. In the meantime, we've got 5 headline news stories that we're going to bounce off y'all quickly, and we'll comment on it. Then we're going to get into the whole prepper topic tonight. So this first one here is pretty shocking, Randy. So I don't know if you can read at the top here. It's a bit of an eye test, but Tehran, nope, Brooklyn, New York. Minute and 14 seconds. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this was posted a couple days ago from Central Park in New York. Check this out. So I'm going to stop it there and basically say, so this is shades of what we saw unfolding approximately 20 years ago in Great Britain and France and other parts of Europe. And you can watch those countries, as we've mentioned numerous times, and it'll tell you what's fixing to happen here. They're a good harbinger of things to come. And I don't have a hate for Muslim people in particular, and I have a hate for anybody for that matter. But what I do know is not once in recorded history have 2 diametrically opposed cultures peacefully coexisted. One always ends up winning out over the other one. And we've been told now for years, I would say, Randy, since the 80s, since the kind of the advent of political correctness, that we can't say anything critical of anybody else's culture, but we're supposed to sacrifice our own culture, because it turns out that as far as the progressive crowd is concerned, we're not a melting pot. We're a cultural mosaic, and there's zero instance of that working in history. I'm going to turn it over to you, Randy. What were your thoughts when you saw this video? Because I sent you the brief earlier of New York covered up in that. This is straight out of the Middle East.
Well, the first thought was it sounds like prayer time. I
Correct.
could hear him say Muhammad or something a couple times. I don't know what the rest of he's saying, but it sounded like prayer time that's being announced out. And you're exactly right. There's never been two cultures on this planet diametrically opposed that got along, and they're not going to. These people aren't here to assimilate. And I don't hate Muslims either per se, as kind of the way you said it. What I hate is Islam and its leaders and the people that, the fanaticals, certainly the ones that, and there's a bunch of them that are running this type of operation, where it comes from the Muslim Brotherhood is where it all started. And that's just taken across the globe. I hate those folks. Why? Because I saw what they did over there. You know what I'm saying? I went and followed them. And it's, again, you don't have to just go off of what they did to American soldiers, right? They were doing it to their own people. These people are very brutal. They're very mean. They're very cold. Islam is not a peaceful religion, folks. It's not. It's not. And in fact, it's a false religion. It's a cult at this point is really what it is. And so every country they've been in and done this to, they do the same thing. Just like there's a reason why no country on the planet takes Palestinians. Because every country they've been in, they tried to overthrow the government. What do you think Muslims do? What do you think Islam does? It's the same exact thing. It's just a larger group and population of people now that there's 2 billion or something. I mean, it's a lot of people that are under Islam.
Over 2 billion. That's correct.
Yep. And again, the worst part about it is we don't just have to look at other countries. They're actually saying it out loud now, including this guy that's running for the mayor in New York City. There's documents out. There's things he said. And then there's been others. They want to take us over by using our own system. First of all, by freedom of religion, so they can come over here and do what they want in Islam, where, even here in Plano, Texas, and out in McKinney, you have them playing just like that, just like they do in the Middle East. Well, there's a reason why Christian churches have never been allowed to be up at the tower and blasting out Christian hymns and stuff to the public, right? That's been a long time. So why are we allowing the Muslims to do that under the guise of religious freedom is not correct. And we shouldn't be allowing that. Heck, we shouldn't be allowing them to come and congregate the way they are, because we'll go back to even Plano, that neighborhood they have here in Texas, and in Texas of all places, that you have to be a Muslim to be able to buy a house there and move in. Try that with any other metric, right? Any other field of saying, you have to be all white, you have to be all black, you have to be any of that. It's discrimination. And, that's against the law here, even when you're selling property, correct? I mean,
it is. Somebody earlier today, and I've been in and out of meetings all day, made a comment with regards to what you're discussing. So a particular community, whether it's Dearborn, Irving / Plano, and said, could somebody please tell me where the Christian voting blocks are in these Muslim countries?
That's right.
And they don't exist at the end of the day. So
they want to, just like Dearborn, they want to be, if they get enough of them there, they're going to elect themselves into the positions, and then they're going to change the laws and everything else there and call it legal because they did it in those elected positions. But again, it will all be unconstitutional. And I back kicking this guy, taking back his natural citizenship, and then send him somewhere else. And I really think that they should do that. I would back that every day, all day.
So I don't want to dwell on this stuff too much. And I
apologize if I got
no apology necessary. I want to get into the main topic, but I want to say something here quickly so that our audience can start to kind of ruminate on this. So the press is basically taking this position of, well, it's a fait accompli, Mandami will be the next mayor of New York City. So I don't know if you had any opportunity to delve into the Democrat primary here, but how many New Yorkers that are eligible voters do you think voted for this guy, Mandami?
Oh, I think probably zero. Now there are probably some Muslims, but zero.
Well, 5% of eligible voters in New York City voted in the Democrat primary, and they're ready to throw in the hat and say, well, obviously he'll be our next mayor.
Well, it sounds like the both times with Trump, because they knew they had it fixed. So they said there's no way he was going to be president. This guy, well, first it was Hillary.
Yes.
It was Biden, and then Kamala.
So here's the thing, the point I'm trying to make. This is the same pattern that happened in England starting 20 years ago, where these guys would run for mayor. And here's a number for you, by the way, that you're welcome to look up. 37 of the largest cities in Great Britain now have a mayor who was born in Pakistan. And Pakistan, of course, 96% Muslim, that are Muslims as well. And there's lots of people like the progressives who will say, you guys are, this is fear porn, and that Muslims only make up something like 8% of the population in Great Britain. You don't have to worry about them taking over or anything like that. Well, you know what? You don't have to have a majority of the citizenship to gain control of the government. And that's the biggest thing, Randy, that scares me. So the Pakistani government, the military, they have old fission style nukes. Okay. They're big, they're fat, they're heavy. They do not have intercontinental ballistic missiles. By definition, an ICBM has to travel 3,300 miles or more. But France and England are a major concern. Number one, England has our Trident missiles. They have 8 subs. They can drop nukes anywhere around the world in the megatons, thermonuclear warheads, hydrogen bomb, as opposed to old fission style like we dropped in Japan. France has the Triad, so they can deliver nukes by air, land, and sea, thermonuclear warheads. And I'll tell you what, if people are worried about Muslim countries in the Middle East with nuclear bombs, they should be a whole lot more worried about England and France, because even with a small percentage of the population, they're on the path to taking over the government in both of those countries. And that puts their finger on that big red button. And if you think they're not going to lob one at us, you haven't been paying attention, because they're all sworn to destroy Christianity, destroy the infidels, destroy all non-believers, and in particular, destroy the great Satan, aka the United States of America. So where I'm going with this, Randy, 5% of New Yorkers voted for this guy, eligible voters, okay? And the press is basically saying, well, he's going to be the next mayor. That's all there is to it. Andrew Cuomo steps aside and says, yeah, he's going to win, even though he didn't get over 50% of the votes in their crazy ranked voting scheme. Bottom line is, this guy's fixing to be installed. They are going to install this guy as the mayor. And then he's going to do things. He's already on record as saying he's going to tax white neighborhoods more than any other neighborhood.
And he's going to lessen the tax on the other ones.
He's going to lessen the taxes elsewhere. He's going to put massive rent controls in place. There are multiple reports this week of commercial real estate agents, brokers in New York City saying after he came out and said, well, we're going to put all these rent controls in place, we're going to make rent more affordable in New York City, they had deals going with people to buy, multi-unit residential housing, who called up their agent and said, yeah, we're not going to invest in any type of real estate, multifamily units in New York City as a result of this. So all I'm trying to say is, and here you go, by the way, there you go. Only 5% of New Yorkers voted for Mandani, and less than 30% even bothered to vote. And that's my next point that I want to make before we get on to the main story. And that is, the reason that they push this narrative that it's a fait accompli, that somebody like this is going to win no matter what, and I say installed because they're not going to win, is because they disenfranchise people. They're like, well, there's no sense of me going and voting because my vote's not going to matter because this guy's going to win. But they've manufactured this with only 5% of eligible voters coming out and supporting this guy.
Well, and that's 5% out of 30 of the eligible voters only. So where's the other 25%, which is more of the vote than the 5%? I mean, none of that makes sense.
It only makes sense in the context that they're trying to convince people that you
Sure.
shouldn't even, don't
Absolutely.
waste your time, don't worry about voting. He's going to be the mayor no matter what. They did the same thing with Khan in London the first time that he was installed. So we could go down this rabbit hole all night long, but I'm going to try and save us from that happening. So I'm going to go into the main topic now, Randy, and the first article that we have up, activist post. So this is got some, call it progressive undertones to it, and I chose it as the opening story for a particular reason. So, rise of the left-wing preppers from mockery to total buy-in. Remember when prepping was a punchline? Preppers were the nut jobs with bunkers and bug-out bags. Cable news laughed, Twitter mocked, but when shelves went bare in 2020 and the system started buckling under its own weight, suddenly people who spent their lives depending on that system wanted to learn how to bake bread and store water. Now the same people who used to call preppers conspiracy theorists are out here talking about resilience and community systems like they discovered something new. They slap feel-good labels on it: mutual aid, sustainable living, decentralized networks, but the guts are the same: stockpiling, planning, self-reliance. It's just dressed in, this guy says, softer language. I would say politically correct language. But here's the thing: survival doesn't care what you call it. Prepping is prepping, whether you've got a root cellar in Idaho or a co-op garden in Portland. You're preparing for collapse. The only difference is some of us saw it coming before it was cool. And this is a fairly long article. And if you go to survivaldispatchnews.com and you sign up for a free account, you get our daily situation reports. That's a summary of all the things we're going to cover here tonight. And if you're a paying member, by the way, thank you very much, you also get all of our sources. So I want to say there's somewhere around 20 sources that we used for this episode, and they're all below my signature in the situation report. So at the end of the day, Randy, the whole point of this was to just show that the prepper community has expanded well beyond what many people would call, right-wing, conspiracy theorist nuts, so on and so forth. So I'm going to get some comments from you after this one here, Randy. I just want to get the numbers out there. So this is a fairly recent article, May 25th. I mean, it's barely a month old. So how many Americans are preppers? 2025 stats and trends. These are hard numbers to get really accurate on. What you can get more accurate is the dollar spent as opposed to the number of people. And I've seen numbers saying that somewhere between 20 and 70 million, actually 86 million, I caught one this morning, Americans could be considered preppers because they've gone through certain steps, which are measured, by doing surveys, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't tell you how many Americans are prepping. Here's what I can tell you. In 2017, the number put on the prepper market was $75 billion. So that means people were buying up extra food that they didn't need, and they were stockpiling it, water and how to treat water, ammunition, all of that sort of stuff. 2025, the projected number is that 500 billion will be spent on prepper activities. And I don't know what the number was in 2017 for the split between males and females. What I can tell you is that when I acquired the assets to Survival Dispatch 3 years ago, the Survival Dispatch audience was 96% male and 4% female. And the current number right now, as of today, 60% male, 40% female. And females are big on the prepper side of things. They love to stack up their groceries. They want to provide and protect their families, right? From a food perspective, food and water perspective. At the end of the day, the point is that the prepper market has absolutely exploded. So here's the key takeaways, and then I want to get your comments, Randy. So they're saying in this particular article, approximately 1 in 16 Americans is a self-described prepper. 4 out of 5 practice at least basic readiness. Texas and the Mountain West remain hotbeds, but young coastal urbanites are a fast-growing segment. The prepper economy rivals the outdoor recreation market and is growing faster than U.S. GDP. Diversity is expanding. Younger, more progressive, and more female preppers are reshaping product and content demand. Somewhere tonight, Randy, I have a chart that shows that Gen Z and call it the younger half of millennials are spending more as preppers than any other segment of our society, which is pretty surprising. So thoughts on this really fairly quick change in demographics over the course of the past 6 or 7 years, Randy?
Well, you know, I say one of the biggest things is everybody's watched what's happened. You know, you mentioned 2020 and with the supply chain, and people realize that somebody did that intentionally. So they could do it at any time. But I think one of the biggest things that really has probably turned people's heads is all these elite wealthy folks spending millions and millions of dollars for these underground bunkers and stocking them with prepping.
Yeah.
And that says a lot. When they're doing it, I think that, you know, and it certainly it's global, right? This isn't just the rich people in the United States doing this. This is all of them. And they all have some kind of bug out bunker that's as well beyond any of us.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think I mentioned before, you know, I know the pros have one, right? And the pros have been billionaires for a long time, ever since I've been alive. But they actually have a little community down there. They have cattle, all kinds of stuff. That's the degree that this thing is done. So when you have people like that going to that degree, everybody takes note.
So we have a friend, Todd Savage from Survival Retreat Consulting. We haven't had him on recently, but he has done some amazing projects along the lines of what you just mentioned, Randy. So some of the stuff that he does, he can publish on his website. Some of the other stuff he can't because the people want ultimate privacy. But I've seen him show me, he showed me pictures basically where you see this piece of property and it looks like there's a big berm and it's rolling mountains and hillsides and stuff like that. And on one side of that berm is a very disguised entranceway. And once you go through that entrance, there's an elevator and stairs, either or, that take you down, you know, in the range of about 25 to 50 feet below surface. And the living quarters are off the chain. Like it's, you know, it's the rich and famous type thing. But when you fly over them, you don't see anything. When you drive around the property, walk around the property, you don't see anything. There's a lot more of that out there than most of us know. And it was interesting when Todd Savage shared that with us. But here's some more numbers from the first article. So, you know, how many preppers are there in the USA? Multiple independent tallies converge on roughly 20 million US adults who self-identify as preppers in 2025. The long-running True Prepper demographic model pegs the figure at 23 million. And then, of course, you have other people saying it's upwards of 86 million is the highest one that I've seen. So basically, FEMA gathers data on some of this stuff, okay? And regardless of what the baseline number is, even FEMA is saying that the number of people who fit the prepper mold have doubled since 2017. And they're saying here, as of January 1st, 2025, somewhere between 5.9 and 6.7% of Americans are preppers out of 341 million residents. That's how they get into the 20 millions. I'm not sure how the people justify getting into the 80 millions, but again, it's a big range and it's a big number. So this particular article, again, which is just from last month, goes on to discuss things like what is a prepper, mindset, myths, et cetera, and I've got other articles that we'll get into that answer some of that stuff, but I want to move over here to a website called trueprepper.com to have a look at the statistics and demographics. And for all you watching this episode, we're laying the groundwork of giving you some statistics, what the demographics look like, what the dollar values look like. And then we're going to get into very specific things, power stations, ways to, purify water, those sort of things. But we want to capture what the lay of the land is. So this one here, prepping statistics and demographics, and I'm pretty sure this is the one, Randy, that has the chart in it that shows, there it is right there. This was the big takeaway from this particular article. There's certainly been an increase in preparedness for younger ages in the U.S. due to COVID-19, political reasons, and climate change. A significant group in that 60 to 69 range still remembers Cold War civil defense and prepared through Y2K and other potential events and disasters. But check this out. 31.8% of Americans between the ages of 30 and 39 hit the profile of a prepper. You've got 14.9% for Gen Z, 20 to 29, and you've got I would say this is kind of like the tail end of Gen Xers and the beginning of millennials, 40 to 49, has actually dropped 16% since 2017 timeframe. And our category, 50 to 59, 100% Gen Xers, has dropped 12.5%. And then you have the baby boomers, 14.2, and then it drops off pretty radically after that. But yeah, what were your thoughts when you saw this, Randy? I was surprised to see 30 to 39 by far and away being the biggest segment.
You know what I think is, like, all these stats that we get these days, you can't trust any of them. Now, I don't know, maybe we can these, but here's what I think. It probably is more, right? Because it's kind of like, you remember, you've already mentioned it, what prepping, if you were a prepper, how people used to look at you. You know, you were like a used car salesman or something, you know what I mean? But that stock is rising a little bit. But I think or let's just take, 2016. People didn't want to admit they were voting for Trump. We knew there was a lot of them out there that didn't want to admit it, and they didn't. I think prepping is the same thing now. I think there's probably a lot of folks that don't want to admit that they're prepping. And then there's going to be some folks that are smart that didn't put the word out for neighbors like, the one Jeff, or the one your guys use the conflicted question on. Oh, we're not going to prep. We've got guns. We'll just take by force whatever we need when something goes down. So some people may not want to disclose that they're prepping for that very reason, which would be smart. So I don't know how they could, unless, they're using technology and then doing some illegal stuff, spying on everything you're doing. How are they going to know those numbers? Because not everybody's going to admit it.
So FEMA runs an annual survey, and they poll somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people, and that's where a lot of these numbers come from. I found the point where 86 million preppers is quoted here, which is probably just not accurate. And trueprepper.com flat out states, and this is from large news outlets, that 86 million Americans are preppers, but they're saying that's well above the upper, boundary established by that annual FEMA survey, amongst other sources. But here's some interesting stuff.
Well, that would be close to a third of the nation, right? Just under a third.
Yeah, correct.
That might be a little high. I don't know that a third can afford it.
Well, that's interesting you mention that, because this article actually gets into dollars and cents. So here's the background: that FEMA runs an annual survey polling around 3,000 people in high-risk disaster specific areas and 4,000 people generally across the U.S. And then using that general data, all of these numbers, regardless if it's the low or high end, it's an extrapolation of that. So it's not an exact number. It's not an exact science. What is a more accurate number, though, is going from 75 billion in prepper spend in 2017-18 to 500 billion this year.
Oh no, that definitely is the proof right there. That is the proof.
100%. So we looked at the demographics. Here's what the racial breakdown looks like. So 61.2% of preppers are Caucasian, 15.1% Hispanic, 13.3% Black, and then the next one, other, at 7.3. But here's your income level. So one of the main deterrents cited by that large portion of people with intent to prepare is the cost of getting prepared. Many people believe that preppers have big wallets and are able to spend large amounts to be prepared. The income level breakdown disputes this, showing that most preppers have to budget frugally to get prepared and plan carefully to meet their goals. So 10% under 15,000 a year, that surprised me when I saw that. 10.6 have an annual income 25 to 35,000, 12.7 35 to 50,000. The biggest chunk, 20.6%, 50 to 75K a year. 75 to 100K accounts for 15%, 100K to 150K, 14.7%. And then it drops off. So here's some interesting numbers on this. A whopping 90.5% of preppers are urban preppers. Whopping is the word they used. I wouldn't have used that number. 83% of Americans live in urban centers. So this is not a particularly surprising number to me. The majority of preppers are homeowners, 73.4%. Most preppers who are renting are apartment preppers, 54.7%. Christians make up 38.1% of preppers, a larger portion than the total of respondents, 32.9%. 21.5% of preppers have disabilities or permanent health conditions that affect their preparedness. And I can tell you, over the past few years, we've had a number of people ask us to either do articles or videos on how to prep when you're physically disabled. And it's ironic that, as far as your classification and my classification is concerned, is that we fall into that, handicap portion of the society. You lost a leg, I lost an eye, but either way, it's hard to prep for a lot of people who are classified as disabled. You and I are lucky that even though we've got some disabilities, we still struggle through it. So this article from trueprepper.com gets into what it calls here concerning statistics. You ready for this? 26% of people say preparing for disasters costs too much. 52% of people expect support from the federal government during emergencies. 71% of people expect help from family during disasters. The 71% doesn't surprise me, doesn't concern me. The 26% of people saying it costs too much, I'm actually surprised that number's not higher. But the 52% of people who expect support from the federal government during emergencies, I personally can't imagine anything worse in an emergency situation than essentially being a refugee in a FEMA rescue camp. I mean, your thoughts on that, Randy? I think that's the last place any of us would truly want to be.
Well, that's for sure. I think it's kind of cool seeing all these graphs, even the one about the age demographics, but certainly the income level. I think it's ironic, even these stats. What it looks like to me is it's the people that know they're going to need more and they're not going to be able to get it, right? Or it's going to be harder. The people with less income, the disabled folks, because they know they better prepare for the tough times. Even if they can't really afford it, they're going to have to meagerly scratch that stuff out and have something. When it got to as we noticed, when it got to 100 grand, 150 and 200, start dropping off to almost no one. And it's because those people make enough money, they think they don't have to. That there's not any real need for them to do it. They'll be able to afford to buy their way out of it or buy stuff from people afterwards. But when the crap hits the fan, your cash isn't going to be worth anything.
So you want to see a scary number? Check this one out right here. Brace yourself for this one from the CDC. 44% of Americans don't have first aid kits in their homes.
That's pretty crazy. When I grew up, everybody had one, or it seems like it, right?
It does seem like it. I mean, that's a really, really big number, but it's not glamorous. People want to go out and train with guns and do the things, but, they see first aid as being boring, I guess. CPR isn't a guaranteed lifesaver. The survival rate for CPR has been calculated at 20%. You would know that, being a paramedic formerly. Are you ready?
I tell people all the time, most of the time you do CPR, you're not going to be successful. You just have to accept that and, be happy for the ones once that I remember that we brought someone back once.
Wow, that's interesting, because I've been told by a number of paramedics over the years, Randy, and first responders, that the efforts made to save somebody or bring somebody back are for the family more so than the individual.
That's exactly why you're doing it.
Yeah,
that's exactly why. Because they want to know that you're fighting for their life, and you do it because you never know. It could be that one. I was only in it for 6 years that I was on an ambulance, and I probably did CPR 10 times, but only once. And I think in class, they told me it's at least 75% were not going to come back, at least.
Well, and this number here says it works 20% of the time. So
yes, that's roughly.
Yeah, you're directionally correct. This one kind of surprised me. 42% of Americans do not know an immediate family member's phone number. So I think I made a recent comment that the only phone number I've really memorized, right? The only phone number I've memorized in the past however many years would be my wife's phone number.
Well, it's terrible. I used to, when we dialed numbers before cell phones, I knew everybody's phone number in my head. Everybody. Right. And now you're right. I know a couple of numbers and that's it. Maybe so 4. I think I know 4. My kids, my parents, and my girlfriend.
So check this out, Randy. 73214. That was my combination for my locker in my freshman year,
Oh, no
1983.
way.
I mean, we're both born 69, same thing.
I can still tell you what my phone number was, but I cannot tell you what my locker number was back
So
then.
can I, 9678079. But the funny thing
Mine was
about that is
776-7769. I just wanted to prove it.
that it's
512
great.
area code. Yeah.
Here's the crazy thing, Randy. Once I got past 40, I can still remember those numbers, but if you introduce me to somebody, it's highly unlikely I'll be able to tell you what their name is 5 minutes later. So I try to get in the habit of saying their name over and over again to try and pound it in there. But anyway, moving on.
That's exactly what I do. I try to use their name a couple of times because otherwise the same thing happens to me. And then I'm like, oh, goodness. It's so embarrassing. Yeah.
So moving on to the next one here. So 10 predictions for preppers and survivalists in 2025. And again, the preppers and survivalists is kind of considered a one community, but if you get right down to brass tacks, it's not.
It's a big difference.
To be a prepper, you know, you're stacking stuff up, right? Like you're increasing your stock of food, water, necessities, essentially, right? Whereas survivalists have a whole other set of skills. And there's an old adage, the more you know, the less you need. And whereas on the prepper side, it's important to know some stuff, but in the prepper world, it's more like 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So
well, here's reality though. Here's reality though. Sooner or later, even no matter how much you prepped, if things go bad enough, like the conflicted question, if we ended up in that type of situation, guess what? Sooner or later, you're going to run out of whatever you prepped. And then you're going to be a survivalist, whether you're a good one or not. You know what I mean? That's a fact. And there is, as you said, there is a big difference. Survivalist just isn't about prepping food. It's not just about food, but it's also being able to procure food out on the wild. There is no 7-Eleven. There is no HEB or Publix in your case.
Well, let's sit on that just for a second here. So 1929, when the stock market crashed, within 60 days, it became front page news for any newspaper for somebody spotting a deer. So the population, when the stock market crashes, half of what it is today. And within 2 months, the countryside was stripped of harvestable animals to eat, basically. So anybody who thinks that, you know, it's going to be like the movies, we're going to have this post-apocalyptic world and you're going to bug out to the countryside and, you know, live off the land, that's a fantasy. That's not going to happen. And ever since we took over Survival Dispatch or acquired Survival Dispatch, I've been telling people, you know, again, prepare for what's most likely. And if you don't have somewhere to bug out to, you've got to be bugging in, and you don't need a bug out bag. You need a get home bag.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to happen next week, but there's a whole bunch of posts on X that I caught just before we went live, Randy, of young Muslim men saying to America that we have 4 days and you're going to see what happens in 4 days. And don't worry about who I am because you'll know in 4 days. I don't know if that's hollow threats or not.
Isn't that kind of the same thing the guy, last year or whenever it was when we covered the border, one of the times with Dr. Pete?
Correct.
It was that Muslim guy that came across, said, you'll know who I am very soon.
So we have eyes on him in DFW, by the way. That's where he is.
Gotcha.
Wondering.
Great. He's ready with me. I love to hear that.
I spoke to some law enforcement guys
Maybe
on that topic a couple weeks ago, and that's where he's at. But anyway, moving along here, because we do have a fair bit of ground to cover.
Yeah.
This is a good article on preparedb.com. And again, our situation report for today, I published it first thing this morning, has all of these links in it. So why preparedness matters more than ever. So you've got climate disasters, and whether you believe in climate change or not, we have storms. So chalk it up as storm prep. Supply chain breakdowns, economic instability, technological vulnerabilities. Technological vulnerabilities would be along the lines of grocery stores have at any particular point in time 3 days worth of food on their shelf. Everything is run through what are called 3 or 4 or 5 PL systems. So it stands for a 3-party logistics. What that means is when the stock hits a certain level, it automatically generates the bill of lading, the PO to the distributor, so on and so forth. So when you start knocking out things like data networks, there's no pen and paper backup to revert back to for the supply chain for food.
right.
So, I mean, I've been saying for as long as I can remember, we're never more than 3 missed meals away from anarchy. Look at what people do on Black Friday to each other for a TV. Imagine what they'll do when they don't have any food. Pretty crazy stuff. So here's some key principles of prepping and survivalism. So self-sufficiency, obviously. 1% of Americans right now get their fruit and vegetables from their backyard. At the end of World War II, that number was 50%. Adaptability. So the need to be able to change plans flexibility, pardon me, or resources in the face of change, like these emergencies happening. Redundancy. So we're back to 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Knowledge and skills, community and collaboration. So on the knowledge and skills, just quickly on that one, first aid, food preservation, all of those sorts of things. If you have a bunch of seeds and you think that when the shit hits the fan that you're just going to start a garden and you'll be okay, that's not the case. It's a lot of work. There will be all kinds of critters that will try and eat and destroy whatever you're doing, and you have to figure out what the best solution is for your geography at that particular point in time. So having, for example,
I would include, instead of just home repairs, I would also include home modification. You might have to modify your home in some way to, make it better defensible, we'll say.
So there are some people that I know that their plan is, if things get really, really bad, is they'll make their home look like it's abandoned. Maybe it's been burned out, something like that, all boarded up, so on and so forth. God forbid that we ever get to that particular point. But I'm not going to read the rest of this article here. There's a lot of good information. Go to preparedbee.com. Yep. So prepared BEE, just like the bug, preparedbee.com, and look for the 10 predictions for preppers and survivalists in 2025. There's some good instructions here. We've got some PDFs available to download that we've uploaded to our website that you can get as well. So let's transition now into some of the bad advice. So essentially where we are for people just joining, because I just saw a big jump in the number of people watching. This is going out to 9 platforms. So we've established that over the course of the past 7 years, the prepper market has gone from about 75 billion to 500 billion a year. The estimates range from 20 million to 80 million Americans being preppers. The lower number is probably more accurate. Part of the problem with this influx of new preppers is we have a bunch of self-proclaimed experts. Everybody on the interwebs is an expert. So the next phase of tonight's episode is to discuss some of these myths that can actually get you killed. Then we will wrap up after that with a whole bunch of suggestions on things. For example, Randy, I've got a power station sitting beside me that I've been testing for a couple months now, and it's going on special for Prime Day. And I don't have an affiliate relationship with these guys, but for $599, it's going to be a really, really good entry-level power station for people. 31.8 cents, I think I calculated, on the price per watt hour for the battery, and that's for LifePo 4. Amazing price, but we'll get into all those specifics here shortly. So let's have a look at some of these myths, and by all means, stop me if there's something you want to dive a little deeper into, Randy. So rub frostbitten skin, clearly not something we have to worry about down here in the South. Drinking liquor will warm you up. Actually, that will make you lose body temperature faster than anything else.
By thinning your blood, just so you know.
Yes. All base layers work equally well. Not true. Cotton kills, or at least could lead to hypothermia. Wool is the best of them all as far as natural products are concerned. Don't feed a victim of hypothermia. Not true. And again, so those of you who aren't familiar with our podcast, Randy was a Green Beret, and before that, he was a paramedic. So he's got a lot of hands-on knowledge when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Let a hypothermic victim get some sleep. Let's just stop on that for a second. This kind of reminds me of the SOP for concussions. If you let that person go to sleep, what's the risk, Randy?
I think it's pretty high. I don't know what the exact number is. And I was hypothermic one time in the Q course, and it was probably 4 o'clock in the morning, and they end up some of my buddies end up wrapping, as a whoopee is what we call it. It was one of the camo blankets you can buy in the Army. Those things are the best thing we ever had. And then I think, 2 or 3 of them sat around me, laid on me and helped warm me up. But it's a pretty serious deal. It's very serious.
Yeah, I mean, we have a neighbor in Georgia, so we've got a cabin in BFE, Georgia, and we're at the top of the mountain, and it's fairly steep. And our neighbor had a stroke a couple years ago, and she's a ways down on our private road, and she was coming home Christmas Eve last year, Randy, and there had been an ice storm, and we weren't there. We were here in Florida, and she slid and fell and managed to wedge herself underneath the front patio deck and was stuck there. And she knew she's an outdoors person, and she knew that she was being affected by hypothermia, and she knew that she was starting to kind of go into la la land, and she had presence of mind to call another neighbor, which is crazy. So this other husband and wife show up around the same age as Linda, so mid-60s, and the husband takes one step and slides on the ice and gets wedged underneath the deck right beside him.
Oh my goodness.
So thankfully all's well and ended well.
Well, I'll tell you, scroll it back up a little bit where there was a couple, because she's right. That's what happened to me too. Where was the shivering, confusion? There we go. Slurred speech and clumsiness. That's what they told me. When I started speaking gibberish, they knew something was up. Of course, I've been with these guys in the course for quite some time now too, so they knew me. We were good friends. Yeah.
Not something we have to worry about in June, but
no,
anyway,
not at all, thankfully.
So some of the additional myths: eating raw meat and seafood is safe.
Yeah, don't do that.
All I have to say is that a lot of those, critters have pathogens in them.
Yes,
that are either killing them or they have some resistance to it, but that we don't have the ability to fight off, and can end up becoming quite dangerous. You can
I've cleaned a lot of fish. There's worms in fish.
Yeah.
And we'll take rabbits, for example. People think they're going to live on the lamb until after the first hard freeze. Like if you kill a rabbit in the summertime, it's going to have a lot of worms. It's after that first hard freeze that that's the best time to take rabbits. So
there's nothing that will turn you off eating something more than cutting it open and having a bunch of worms come out.
That's right.
That's pretty bad. They do, when they measure your brain activity, when you see certain things that are really disgusting, like, maggots eating raw flesh and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the highest scoring traumas as far as triggering people to make them want to barf, essentially. But anyway, moving on here, you can eat anything animals eat. Absolutely not true. They have, resistance to many things that we don't. Cut and suck a snake bite. So I don't know where this started. I guess Hollywood, that's quoted there.
Yeah.
But that can actually make the wound even larger and, cause infection and all sorts of stuff. Moss grows on the north side of trees. Not true. You'll never get lost with a GPS. Randy, I've been saying for years, GPS will drive you off a cliff if you let it.
Well, and here's reality. If things went really bad and there was military action, the first thing they're going to shut off is all that stuff. You're not going to have a phone that's going to tell you how to get there anymore. It's just not. Even satellite, be gone. All of that'll be gone.
Yeah, so let's just sit on that for a second. China numerous times has made snide comments that the way to beat America at war is to take out our satellites, because we're so dependent on satellites for guidance for everything. And there's now open source intelligence of Chinese satellites dogfighting amongst themselves to practice their tactics and techniques.
That's right.
And they're trying to figure that out to use it against us. And, they're not wrong by saying that we're heavily dependent on it. So,
I got one point to make on that. You remember we've talked about drones, and even when we were talking about Ukraine a few months back, and I said, hey, they're working out all those SOPs for the drones right now in Ukraine. That's what they're doing, both offensive wise and defensive wise. And then look what happened in Iran on the strikes of the leadership there, that they use drones. So practicing, I hope we're doing the same thing. You know, I hope our folks are doing the same thing with our satellites, because Chinese definitely are going to come after them. And then we have to realize there's probably Chinese parts in our satellites, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But it's like all our other products.
Yep, 100%. So I'm going to hit all three of these at once, and then feel free to chime in. But I'm working with a company right now that's putting together, call it an entry-level survival kit for your vehicle. And they're tailoring it to different parts of the country because, again, we should all be prepping for what the most likely calamity is. And one of the items that I recommended to this company that they include in their survival kit are 2 candles. And you'd be surprised what you can do with a cheap Mylar blanket and a candle underneath the Mylar blanket as far as staying warm is concerned. It's a great way to stop from going into hypothermia. And keep in mind, like, one of the major causes of hypothermia if you're outside is being in contact with the ground. It will literally suck the warmth out of your body.
And I can attest to that, as I spent many years in the Army and sleeping on the ground. It's in fact what exactly happens. That's why you hear about, you know, Ranger buddies and people in the infantry and special operations in the very cold environments, man, you are snuggling with your buddy in that foxhole because it's a matter of survival.
Right. The one I want to hit on here is, rub 2 sticks together to make a fire. So I'm going to back up again and say it. 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So that company I'm working with who's putting together this survival package, they had a plasma lighter included as
nice,
the way to start a fire,
nice.
Right? And I said, well, you should include a couple more options like waterproof matches, Bic lighters, whatever. It's not expensive stuff. And they asked why. And this is a company who's just getting into the survival industry, by the way. And I said, because you can't count on your first tool always working. So if you can add something else that doesn't weigh a lot, doesn't take up a lot of space, then you should do that for backup. So it's funny, rub 2 sticks together to make a fire. I mean,
well, I do like the device they have here, because people think they can just grab any stick, any wood, and rub them together. The harder the wood, the harder it is to make a fire. Now, you can't use, rotten wood, but it's what it says here. If you can put your thumbnail in it, then you can start a fire with it. And that's just soft enough that you can start a fire with it, because somebody may get stuck with this and you don't have another option.
So here's a cool thing. Wazoo have a card out that it's a fire card, okay? And it looks like a credit card, and it's made out of the same material that guitar picks are made out of. And for people who don't know this, that material that guitar picks are made out of is highly flammable. Like, I mean, highly flammable. So you can take your pocket knife and you can take a guitar pick and get some flakes off of it and hit it with 1 spark from a ferro rod, and it will light up instantly, just like that.
Hey, that's good advice right there.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the Wazoo fire card is really cool. But if you don't want to order, and that's fine, they're good guys over at Wazoo. Guitar picks, I'm telling you, put guitar picks in your survival kit, and you will have an accelerant, essentially.
A cheap one.
Yeah, it might not be technically quite the right word, but it really is kind of an accelerant, because I'm telling you, 1 spark to shavings off of a guitar pick, you will not believe how fast.
Well, I would say if 1 spark can light it that well, I would call it the same thing.
There you go. So we've touched on some of this stuff. That's all in rubbing sticks together, etc. So myths about hydration, number 23. And we hear and see this all the time. I always think dodgeball when I see this. Yes, I drink my own urine, and I do it because it tastes great. This question invariably comes up in wilderness survival classes. Can we drink urine? This gentleman's response: you could, but why would you want to? Urine's full of the body's waste products. If conditions are grim enough to inspire you to consider urine as a beverage, then you're most likely severely dehydrated. The urine of a dehydrated person should not be reintroduced in the human body under any circumstances. Pee can be handy in other ways. Use it to dampen clothing for evaporative cooling in hot climates, but it's not safe or smart to drink it. Drink raw blood to survive. Another one, suck on a stone for hydration. Eat snow for water. And this eating snow, and of course not yellow snow.
Please.
this will actually drop your body temperature, and it can do it
because it's ice.
to quite an unsafe level as well. So he uses the word here, core freeze, and that's not something that you want to experience. There's another article here that I included in today's SITREP on the most dangerous common survival myths. It covers most of what the other article did, but it adds a couple more. Go survivaldispatchnews.com and sign up for an account. You get our SITREPs for free, and if you're a paying member, you get all of our sources as well. So this article here is additional myths. It's also in the SITREP, and I don't want to waste time repeating the same stuff over and over again. So
well, I just want to say one thing before we move on,
ahead.
Chris. Like the space blanket, you're right, and even one candle. But say you're in your house. I learned this not too long ago. Say you're in your house, certainly after a thing happens, or if you don't have any power and it's cold, you could set up a little tent in your bedroom and sleep in that tent, and it will be much warmer than it would be in the house, and you're not going to freeze to death in that side of that tent. I don't even think you have to use it. We're not talking about a big tent. We're talking about one that'll probably fit on your bed where both of you can lay in it. You know what I mean? And that will keep you warm. So that's just another little, most people have a tent somewhere. Used to anyway.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong, because we don't even all have emergency kits, medical kits in our house anymore.
True. Or like me, and you've got too many of them. So there's been some really good comments made. I'm just kind of caught out of the corner of my eye, and I want to share a couple of them.
Oh, goodness.
So Sven's got a good one here. Yellow snow has electrolytes. If you don't get hypothermia, you will need those. Laugh out loud. That's
oh, goodness.
Rubio says, will belly button lint work?
Hey, I'd give it a shot.
which is pretty funny. Let me see some of the other ones here. Thanks, guys. Gotta go.
Because you got enough lint. I think lint does work. I mean, you'd probably need more than your belly button's worth. But
legit comment from JC here. Use the lint from cotton socks and a spark.
I've heard of this. Yep.
And so while we're on the topic of socks, and especially having a spec op soldier like yourself, Randy, I can't remember what the video was. We published a video at some point in time over the past few years, and we made a recommendation for people to make sure that they had extra socks. And one of the keyboard warriors made a comment on the video that we were idiots, and what a waste of space in a get home or bug out or go bag was, and stuff like that. As soon as your feet go, you're done.
You're done.
You are dead
That's
in
right.
the water. And ask somebody like Randy what a fresh pair of socks does after you've been in the elements for an extended period of time. I'll let you comment on it yourself, Randy.
Well, so the first thing they teach you in the infantry, right, even in basic training, one of the very first things they tell you is don't go cheap on your feet. Buy nice boots, have extra pairs of socks, and then you learn, for me, it was 16 weeks because I was in the infantry. You learn over that 16 weeks why. And I'll tell you a story. When I was in I was in selection. In fact, this was at the very beginning. I hadn't even got selected yet to move on to the rest of the Special Forces qualification course. But at selection, we were doing the PEs. They give you practice. First, you're in the schoolhouse environment where they teach you everything there is about map reading, all these little tricks, like if you get lost, how to use intersections on a map, on a topographical map, by basically what their azimuth of each is. You can find yourself that way. There's churches, power lines, railroads, their own maps, so you can find yourself there. But the other part was, those practical exercises you can go out and practice. So in my very first one, I get to my second point, and I'm moving pretty quick. I'm going, this is easy. So I mess up on my third point. I could tell that story, but it's not the point of this one, but how that happened. But regardless, when I finally figured out that I messed up, some time had went by, because now I had to go make sure, right? And now I'm sure, but a time went by, I get my another point, and it's 6 clicks away, and I have an hour and a half time left. So I already know I'm not getting that fourth point today, right? But I'm not getting that third point. And so what happened was, we're out in the training ground of Camp McCall, 45 minutes to an hour or so outside of Fort Bragg. And I have to cross what is called Big Muddy. And this is a huge draw that's not only full of water at the bottom, but it has trees and brushes. And this thing, you walk down in this thing quite a ways and cross it. And then you go all the way back up. That's how big this draw is. And that's why it's called Big Muddy. There's a little muddy and a big muddy. Anyway, I found a spot where it was only about knee deep or a little less where I could cross, which was good. So I'd get on across. Right there, I should have stopped. I should have stopped and changed my socks because my feet got wet, right? And I should have changed my socks and I should have tightened up my boots. At the very least, I should have tightened up my boots, but I definitely should have changed my socks. But I want to make it. And so I run that entire way. It takes me an hour and 23 minutes to get there. So or maybe I had 15 minutes left, I think. Regardless, it started some huge blisters on the back of my heels, and I've never got blisters on my feet from that. Even when I graduated basic training in the infantry, you have to do a 25-mile road march. Well, I don't know if they do it anymore, but when I was in the infantry, you had to do it. You had to complete a 25-mile road march at the end to pass basic training as an infantry soldier. You know, and they do stop halfway, and you do lunch and you get to rest. But then they also have all these like water can drills, ammo can drills, and you get to do all this other stuff. And then you go finish the last half, so you finish it. And I never got a blister in that. Most people did. A lot of folks did, but mine never did. But the fact I didn't change these socks, and I'm running, remember we talked about it a couple of days ago, I've got at least 45 pounds on my back, right? Because if I have any less than that, I'm getting kicked out because they're going to weigh my ruck when I get back. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So I'm running with this weight on me. And if the blisters ended up being about the size of $50, this was the start of it that day. Now, the rest of selection, they got worse. So by the end, they were size of $50 through all the meat. I mean, the skin was gone. We're into the meat. And I was in a Shaw shoe profile in the Army for 30 days after that, so that my feet could heal. That is how significant it is. Now, just take that a step further. If I'd have still been in a survival situation or had to, continue moving, I'm in a bad way. And eventually, not only was it already detrimental to me, it slowed me down. But, I'll tell you how bad it was. So during the rest of the course, there was a lot of stuff, including the last 48 hours. I had to move 82 clicks. That's 50 miles, folks, in 48 hours. And I had to do that on these feet. What I would do was when they got to hurting and burning so bad that I couldn't hardly stand up or stand it, luckily it was freezing outside. With the next stream or something, poof, I would pop my feet through the ice and sit them in that water until they were almost where I couldn't feel them, right? And then I could keep moving. So you don't change your socks, and you should have extra socks.
Yeah. So great story, Randy. And I just want to make the point I'm seeing another chunk of people just joined. Randy was a Green Beret. If he had changed his socks when he had wet boots and done them up, he probably wouldn't have got those blisters.
Wouldn't have.
And would have been a whole lot better off. You lose your feet, you lose everything. A couple more comments I want to share from people here, Randy. This is a good one from Just Leave Me Alone.
Yes, it is.
Take some dryer lint, rub Vaseline, put it in a Ziploc. Fantastic fire starter because, Vaseline's a petroleum product and it's highly flammable. And our good friend Bruno even mentioned, and lots of people do this as well, just take cotton balls and get them covered up petroleum jelly, put them in your Ziploc bag, and you're good to go. Here's another good comment from Philip Stewart. A Bic lighter will still spark a fire without fuel. And he's absolutely right. It's hitting that little piece of flint. So if you had the Vaseline cotton balls or the Vaseline dryer lint or a guitar pick where you could shave off part of it, that's going to be enough in most cases to get you going. Here's a really, really good question from Mike here. Can stored drinking water go bad over the years, i.e. a 7-gallon water jug with clean water? And the answer is yes. So there's multiple factors at play here. First and foremost, a lot of plastics are full of all kinds of chemicals that when you leave water in them for an extended period of time like that, you get microplastics and chemicals in that water that are really, really bad for you. On top of which, what you also get in a warm climate like here in Florida, this is the mold capital of the world, you will get mold, mildew, all kinds of nasty stuff. If it's something like you took a plastic jug, you filled it up, you put a cap on it, it's not something that was sealed at the factory, there's a high probability that you're going to have something growing in your water. And there's some actually really interesting solutions out there that we're going to get into tonight. Another good comment here from Arthur. Lithium in a AA battery is flammable. It absolutely is. Also, a juicy fruit wrapper, aluminum. If you short out a battery, you can get a spark off of that, which may be enough to set something on fire, like Vaseline, cotton balls, et cetera, but some awesome comments there. Here's one of our guardians. He's awesome. Doherty, there's always got great stuff to offer. Smash the like button. Thank you for reminding me.
Thank you.
I forget that half the time. Well, more than half the time, but anyway, let's, there you go.
You know what I liked?
Steel wool and a 9-volt battery. He's absolutely right.
That absolutely works too.
Yeah.
So Chris, I saw the other day when we were watching Brandon Tatum, you get that fancy little thing down there that just does it by itself and it keeps reminding people, mash the button, like, and then,
Well, you know what?
That's pretty fancy.
That's funny you should say that, because if you look in the brief, there's a note that says, make sure you turn the banner on, and I forgot to turn it on until you just So I don't have Alzheimer's, but I get sometimes I remember.
That's right.
I got another hint when you were talking about getting directions, like getting your bearings.
Yeah.
A lot of people are aware of this, but I'm going to state it anyway. This is not 100%, but it's probably like 97, 98%. Technically, every county road will intersect a state road, and that in turn will intersect an interstate, is the way the road systems were built in most states. I know that there's some exceptions like Pennsylvania and New York and Massachusetts, where the road system is probably like the oldest road systems in the country. But for the most part, if you get lost and you're on a county road, if you go far enough, you'll hit a state road. Jump on the state road and you go far enough, it will get you to an interstate. So that's just something to tuck away. A couple things I want to mention. I got to mention our friend Craig at Stay Brewed Coffee. I do not have any type of affiliate relationship with him. He's a great guy. We like to promote his business. He's got 7 women in his home, his wife, boy, and half a dozen girls of various ages. I drink his product every day. He's super, super kind to send this to me. I can't say enough good things, but one of his daughters always sends me a handwritten card like this one here. So this says Faith, Family, Freedom. It's got a picture of Mount Rushmore on it. As you can see, it's got our flag on it here in the corner. Let me see if I can get it up high enough there. There we go. Can't say enough good things about Craig at Stay Brewed. And thank you again, Craig. We just got that in yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit more about one of our sponsors, Carnival, here before too long. But I got to tell you, this is an amazing product. It's one of those things where you think to yourself, man, why didn't I think of that? Nobody has jumped into this market except for Carnival. What is the market? The market is 100% American meat, so beef or chicken or pork, no mRNA, no antibiotics, grass finished, not grass fed. Grass fed means that the last few weeks they porked them up on grain and all the bad stuff that comes with that. I took a bag of this, the sirloin, a couple nights ago, put it in water. The USDA made them put a thing on here that says it's got to be reconstituted for an hour. In reality, 20 minutes later, I put a bit of seasoning on it, threw it in our air fryer for 4 minutes. It came out medium rare and was really top grade stuff. Here's the advantage is if you're a prepper, you don't need a fridge or freezer to store a high quality protein product because it's freeze dried. It's easy to reconstitute. If you are, let's say a fan of the convenience economy, you can get this delivered to your door on a regular basis. You don't have to go to the grocery again. You don't need fridges and freezers, etc. Throw this stuff in a crock pot. You can make amazing stews. If you're going out on the trail or something like that, you can take this, reconstitute it with some water and cook it or whatever means you have available. The beef, Randy, I don't know if I shared this with you or not. You can take the beef and eat it, without reconstituting it. And it's perfectly safe to do that. I wouldn't do it with the pork or chicken, but the beef that's been freeze dried, the dogs go crazy over it. So these guys have a second product line called Moochables, and it's for mooch. And I've got some interesting stories on that coming up on another episode. Just want to mention that before we moved on. So, well,
also I just want to tap, for those of people that want to use it for trail or even packing, the bag that Chris was holding makes 1.5 pounds of meat, but where he had it in the bag, it's only 6 ounces.
Yeah.
So there is no weight to it at all to store this or carry it.
it's
Beautiful.
amazing how much it makes.
Yep.
So we're kind of at the transition point of tonight's episode where we're going to go from, a lot of the theoretical stuff. How big is the prepper audience / community, both, number of people as well as dollars spent. We've covered some stuff like common myths that, we don't want to buy into. This article is kind of a general article. Beware the self-proclaimed social media experts. So what this is saying, this is a good article. It doesn't matter what the topic at hand is. There's a lot of people on the interwebs who have a little bit of knowledge and profess to be experts. And I'm not saying they on purpose dispense bad information that could hurt somebody or screw them up, but it does. It happens, right? And we also have a number of people now in society who consider themselves Google smart. So I can't tell you how many times I've heard a conversation where somebody has looked something up on Google and then repeated it like it's gospel and it's anything but. And I'm not even talking politics. I'm talking things like there's a conversation in the back of my mind that I heard people discussing rats. And the person said that the rats that they were infested with was whatever type of rat. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not true here in Florida. We have roof rats and we have river rats, and that's it in the state of Florida for rats. And it was some other species. But because Google told them that it was, that kind of rat, that's what they believed. So the whole point of this as we transition tonight's episode is make sure whoever's advice that you're following, that they actually have the credentials to give you that advice, that it's safe advice, it's good advice, and it's advice that can be backed up. So, for example, you can take whatever we say on Survival Dispatch, punch it into a Grok, Google, Yandex, whatever you want, and get verification of what we're telling you. Doesn't offend me in the slightest because I do the same dang thing myself. Point being, just beware of the source of information. So moving on from there, this is a really good article on realitystudios.co. If you're a Guardian, check it out on survivaldispatchnews.com. We have all the links there. So the subheadline here, discover what preppers do, which foods and gear to stockpile, how much cash to keep at home, and U.S. preparedness stats, all in one guide for families, first-time preppers, and aspiring homesteaders. So moving along, let me see here. All right, understanding prepping and getting started. So prepping at its core is the practice of making active preparations for potential emergencies. And again, we're not doomsday preppers. Our whole thing is you should be preparing, for the most likely calamity wherever you are. If you're here in Florida, that's hurricanes, right? What is a prepper at the most basic level? A prepper is simply someone who plans ahead, stocking stuff up. Doesn't require the survival skills and knowledge that a survivalist would require. So here's a couple things in this article on, what is a prepper, the mindset, the myths, debunk, so on and so forth. Obviously, prepper short for prepare. Difference between a prepper and survivalist, I've covered that already. Prepping, you're stocking stuff up. Survivalist, you're acquiring skills. The more you know, the less you need. So what do preppers believe in? Disruptions are inevitable. Redundancy beats luck. So 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. And community is key. Like if we ever did end up in a post-apocalyptic scenario and you don't have a group of people together, you're probably not going to survive too long. Our group here, we've actually got an MD, a surgeon, and a registered nurse in our group, our mutual, a MAG, mutual assistance group. So God forbid, but if somebody was hurt, we've got the medical expertise, firearms experts, so on and so forth. So I want to talk just like disruptions are inevitable. So we've seen every type of disruption you can imagine as a result of hurricanes. We've had water go down for several weeks because a sewer main burst next to a water main. Having no power sucks in Florida, especially when it's hot. Having no power in Florida and no water is even worse. Now you've got a problem of disposing of waste. How do you flush your commode? How do you flush your toilet and get rid of that waste? And how do you get rid of it outside in a safe manner so that it doesn't turn into basically a biohazard? And one of the answers to that is you get a water bob for 30 some odd dollars off of Amazon. It's a bladder, goes in your bathtub before the storm hits. You fill it up full of water. It's got a hand pump on it. You can use that to flush the commode. You can use it for cooking water. et cetera, et cetera. But disruptions truly are inevitable. We're a first world country, third world power grid. Every time we have major storms here, even though they've done a lot to fortify our grid in Florida, when it goes down for extended periods of time. So having, power backups is absolutely critical. I kind of like the fact that this guy put this question in here. Randy, is a prepper a hoarder? Not in theory. Hoarding is disordered, indiscriminate accumulation. Prepping is organized, shelf-stable, rotated, and purpose-driven. A well-labeled pantry that feeds the family all year is the opposite of hoarding stacks of random items. So why do people become preppers? Natural disasters. We've spoke at length about that. Man-made disasters. So think of the train crash in Palestine, Ohio, for example. There's your man-made disaster. Personal empowerment, self-reliance, basically a desire to be less dependent on official emergency services like FEMA, for example. Peace of mind, knowing that you've done the steps to protect your loved ones. It reduces people's anxiety of potential future events. Everyday emergencies. So you lost your job. Now, how are you going to afford groceries? Well, if you're a prepper, you got stuff stacked up. You should be able to get through the short term, let's say, until you get your next job, or you're sick and you can't work and get a paycheck. Other types of personal crises, global events, whether it's a pandemic, a war, the economy crashes, whatever. So the next question is good. Is prepping about doomsday scenarios only? No, this is a common misconception. While some preppers do consider doomsday or large-scale societal collapse scenarios, the vast majority focus on practical preparedness for more common and localized emergencies. This includes things like being able to shelter in place for a few days to a week due to a severe storm, having an emergency kit in the car for breakdowns or unexpected travel delays. Everybody should have an emergency bag in their car. We like to think of them in terms of like a get-home bag. Most Americans, the average American works 15 miles from home. Having a get-home bag is critical if you ever had to get home on foot, for example, because of whatever the emergency is. Being able to manage without power, running water for a short period. Thankfully, there's good, cheap solutions for that. Having a well-stocked first aid kit and the knowledge to use it for common injuries. Is prepping legal? Are there any restrictions I should be aware of? In general, yes, prepping itself, the act of storing food, water, first aid supplies, learning survival skills, perfectly legal in most places, including the United States. However, there can be legal restrictions or considerations related to specific items or activities that might fall under the umbrella of prepping for some individuals. So firearms laws for purchasing stuff, ammunition. Some areas, especially outside of the United States, have strict controls on firearms and ammunition. Certain types of knives or other weapons. Well, just look at the UK. They classify scissors now as a weapon, and of course, you can take the weapon away. You can take the guns away. You can take the knives away. You can take the scissors away. They'll just use a car to run it into a crowd and kill people that way. Radio,
or the oldest in history is stone them to death.
Yeah, there you go. Radio equipment. So it's not hard to triangulate your position if you're using a ham radio and you don't have a license to use a ham radio. And there are certain people in that ham radio community who are very militant over this and will gladly report you to the FCC. That being said, in emergency situations, you do not need a license to use radios, ham radios, GMRS radios. You do a family license, but again, in an emergency, you don't need that at all. Randy, we got some pretty cool devices coming from a website called POClink.com, and they're basically the old mic radios that work over the LTE data network. And you have them in your group and you can communicate anywhere worldwide as long as the LTE data network stays up. So think in terms of like when we have a hurricane, you have a bunch of cell towers go down and you don't have a strong enough signal for a phone conversation. It'll just say call failed. You don't have a strong enough data connection, a 5G data connection to load websites very quickly, but you see the phone says LTE. LTE is a much more lower bandwidth, older technology, as long as that LTE network's available, those POC link radios, you can communicate anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, which is pretty cool. But again, 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So looking forward to the POC links. We have a Garmin InReach Mini that tethers to our phones so we can communicate over satellite. We have Starlink as a backup to our fiber optic so we can communicate that way. And we have ham radios, GMRS radios. We kind of take it to the extreme in some of those instances. Food storage, while generally not an issue for personal use, large-scale food storage in certain types of dwellings might attract attention or violate local health codes. I don't know about that one. I read it just because if any of you have heard of something along those lines, I'd like to hear about it because I have no knowledge on you getting in trouble for having large food storage prepped up. So what are preppers preparing for? We've already covered all of those things. Are preppers crazy? You know, we had this lady approach us from the Epic Times, Epoch Times. By the way, I asked them how to pronounce it. I said, is it Epic Times or Epoch Times? And their answer was yes. I was like, okay, so either one works. The girl,
I think it's Epoch, but I don't know.
So do I. But the first girl I spoke to, she said, can you tell me a little bit as far as your beliefs in prepping is concerned? So I told her you know, my standard thing. And she said, oh, thank God. My editors asked me to do a story on preppers, and they specifically said not to have any doomsday preppers. They want just normal people who are preppers, sort of thing. So that was interesting. She ended up publishing an article on us, which was very much appreciated. Do preppers want the world to end? I'm not going to read the rest.
I would say prepping for doomsday isn't very smart, because in the Bible, what it says is going to happen during that time, you're not going to be able to prep for, and it won't even matter.
Right.
So, what you're talking about is why you should prep, because they're definitely more likely to happen. And when the end of the world comes, it won't matter what you prep for.
Right. So this is a good website, by the way, theprepared.com. So theprepared.com. They've got some really awesome online courses. I have no relationship with them. I've never spoke to them or anything. It's just a website that is really high quality. And this page here, this is fairly recent. It's published February this year. Supermarket Prepper Pantry Guide. So I'm going to mention some companies as we get going here, but the suggestion here is what survival foods to look for when shopping for your prepper pantry. So I like some of the criteria they put out here, right? Long shelf life, easy to store. Stuff doesn't have to go in a fridge or a freezer, easy to prepare, nutritional, which is a big deal.
Yep.
Most of the stuff out there from companies who sell you so-called, prepper food or whatever, it's very high content of what are called high glycemic carbs, which make your blood sugar go up and then crash. High sugar carbs as well.
It's called empty carbs, right? They don't really,
it's not good carbs at all. Yep. And you'll have this wild fluctuation of blood sugar, and you really got to read the labels on this stuff. Calorie density is a big one. So Randy would tell you, being a Green Beret, that the MREs may not taste great, but a very small MRE can have 2,000, 3,000 calories and, get you by. So anyway,
I think they range, the smallest one is 2,400 calories all the way up to 3,600 calories when in MREs.
That's a big deal.
Hey, when you're moving too, I still would eat 3 of those a day. And the times out in the Q course or in the military period, when I was in the field for 30, 45, 60 days or something like that, you're eating a lot of MREs, but you're doing a lot of moving. I would eat 3 of those a day and still lose 20, 25 pounds.
That's impressive. So you're eating 9,000 calories a day and burning,
still dropping.
Still in a caloric deficit.
Yeah.
So moving on in this article, and if you can see the side of my screen here, the bars right here, there's a lot more, and I'm not going to read the whole page, but 5 enemies of shelf life: heat, light, moisture, pests, oxygen, which is why if you have a freeze dryer, we have a freeze dryer, you throw O2 absorbers and everything. My wife double heat seals all the Mylar bags. She doesn't trust just one seal. But it would really suck to spend all the time and effort on freeze drying food only to have it go bad. Best survival foods for your prepping list. So I'm not a big believer in grains. Okay. So, rice, wheat, dry corn, popcorn, so on and so forth. My wife is 100% carnivore diet. I do my best to be probably 80%, to be honest. But at the end of the day, you can eat a carnivore diet and it will give your body everything that it needs, including all of the good fats. And if you think back to Native Americans, they were super lean and they ate a lot of fat. Upwards of 50% of their diet was animal fat, and yet they were very lean. So they were in a, ketosis type of state. And my wife, she eats butter, bacon, and steak. That's 99% of the calories that she intake. Your brain is largely fat and consumes fat. She's had a number of injuries from MVAs over the years. Her pain level has greatly reduced because the fat lubricates your joints. So if I had the choice, Randy, to be quite honest, of stocking up grains or spending the money on protein like this,
Oh, absolutely.
it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter that we work with these guys. We don't have an affiliate relationship, but they pay us a stipend each month, helps us defray costs so we can bring you the truth. I mean, we work on this stuff 7 days a week. If we didn't have sponsors like this, we wouldn't be able to do that. But I would take this all day long. I'd take, protein, even canned tuna or canned salmon or whatever the case may be. I will take that 100% protein over grains and all the other stuff any day of the week.
Any day.
So moving on from there, beans, legumes, some of the legumes, aren't necessarily as bad for you as the grains are, but fats, good fats is a really good thing. So beef tallow, for example, which is not on this list, but peanut butter, it does have sugar in it most of the time. But all of these things, olive oil, I would get behind. Some of the other oils, not necessarily. Meats and other proteins, long shelf life. So I love sardines, for example. Most people can't stand them.
Yep.
Believe it or not, Randy, right here, Spam.
Oh yeah, I've got some.
Is actually not that bad for you. It's a lot of protein. It's a lot of straight up meat and fat, and
it lasts forever. That's But I'm gonna be honest. I probably, if I'd have known about Carnivore, I'd probably have it instead of the Spam also. But I do have the Spam.
So. We've got both.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, there's some good choices here: canned tuna, salmon, sardines, Spam, canned chicken, even. But you've got a number of choices there, and if there's anything that a lot of people, I would say, in the prepper community that they have a shortfall of, it, that's good proteins. Essentially,
Yep.
They get stocked up on all the grains and stuff, and that's not necessarily the way to go. So I'll move on from there to the next one here. And this kind of addresses the question from Mike earlier as far as water and long-term storage. So I can't remember the brand name for the life of me now, but we have them, this style of jug right here where this green one is, that's specifically made for storing water for long-term. And I've actually got some in the room next to me here. You got to be careful what you put water in for any type of period of time sort of thing. So this article here, and it's at theprepared.com, look for water storage containers. This will tell you how they rank them all. So this one, for example, Reliance Rhino 5.5 gallon water container, toughest container in the middle tier price class, somewhat stackable for short-term storage, comes with everything you need, survived our drop/crush tests. This is a really good article, by the way, and I would follow the recommendations here. Here's the one, for example, best overall can, the Scepter 5-gallon military water can. We have a couple of these too, by the way. Best overall water can we've ever tested, built tough, military tested features, very large fill hole, secondary spout holes, screw top airflow vent, nice spigot, accessories. So go to theprepared.com, check out water storage containers. There's links to everything in here.
And those are the water cans I was talking about getting to carry earlier, because they are in the military. There's a ton of them.
Yeah, I mean, they're badass for sure.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next one here, you can find a gazillion lists out there to build your go bag.
Yeah.
And again, 83% of Americans live in urban centers and have nowhere to bug out to. And you're not going to bug out to the woods. It means you're going to bug in. But for example, the intelligence that's out there as far as terrorist attacks are concerned, they love to do things morning or evening rush hour, and they can disrupt people obviously at those 2 times a day. And so you should always have a go bag in your vehicle. We prefer to call it a get home bag. And there's different philosophies on how to do this depending on how far away you are. Our philosophy is we put a whole bunch of stuff in the truck. And let's say we're 5 to 15 miles away from home. We know we can easily walk that the same day. We're not going to take tents and other things like that with us. So we grab our get home bag. We jettison the stuff that we don't need, only take what we do need. But this article here, the prepared.com, look at bug out bag list, but think of it in terms of getting home, gives you a good idea of the things to include. So I like how they break this down, by the way, to, an emergency kit versus a 72-hour kit. We were sent a 72-hour kit, and I'm trying to remember the name of the company now. It's sitting in the next room as well. It'll come to me shortly, Randy, but it was one of those 80-20 deals where 80% of what they put in that bag was really, really good. And we replaced the other 20% with things that we, stand behind, that we like. So there's a lot of purists out there that say, well, I want to build my entire bag kit from scratch. And that's cool if you have the knowledge. A lot of people who don't have the knowledge want to come to somebody that they trust. And that company or vendor says, look, this bag, will have everything that you need into it. And then they have peace of mind knowing that they have that. I kind of fall right in the middle, Randy. I like to buy a kit that somebody else has put together and then swap out a handful of things for the stuff I actually prefer. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but again, you've got get home bag is not necessarily the same thing as a 72-hour kit. 72-hour kit, you're probably not going to carry it. So that would be, you're stranded somewhere and you need to survive for at least 72 hours before somebody can rescue you. A 72-hour bag is going to be bigger, heavier, and more comprehensive versus the other ones. I mean, they speak here in terms of an inch bag, and that's an acronym, stands for I'm never coming home. A good bag, get out of Dodge, an SHTF bag, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, our philosophy is we put all the things in the truck, and then whatever the circumstances are, that's what actually goes in the bag that we go on the get home mission. Randy, your thoughts on what you would recommend that people do as far as building their bug out bag, get home bag, go bag, whatever you want to call it?
Well, I think you hit it pretty good. It comes down to some of it is, like you said, going to come down to personal preference, right? And what's more important to you. It might be the situation, it might be the area of the country. There's several things that are going to play into that. Well, one of the things I do, like for a medical bag, there's some special. Can you,
Randy?
Yeah.
During your answer of this, I just want to get your intake on level 1, 2, 3 kits, 20 pounds, 35 pounds, and 45 pounds. So by all means, share your medical bag stuff, but I want our audience to hear from you firsthand what those pounds look like in reality.
Well, the only thing I was going to tap on the medical bag, there's a couple of special operations guys that were Green Berets that you can look up. They're selling some medical bags, and those are spot on because and these are smaller, the medics on teams carry rather large medical bags. These are not that big, but they do have everything you would need. And then when I go through this list here, under 20 pounds, you know what I mean, is probably, and again, there's going to be different reasons you would lose this, or use these different ones. But people have to realize even 20 pounds, you have to carry it for a little while. It's going to get heavy. You get down to that 45-pound level, as I mentioned in the previous podcast and episodes, and I'll mention it here, 45 pounds is the requirement when you go through the Special Forces qualification course. Anytime you go out in the field or do any ruck marches or anything, that you've got we'll call a backpack. It's called an Alice pack in the Army. And you have the large one that you've also modified so it can hold more stuff. 45 pounds is the minimum it can weigh at any time they stop you and weigh that ruck, is what we call it. It's a ruck. 45 pounds is no joke. If they're putting it as a metric in the special operations courses, that's because it's significant. to carry 45 pounds for any length of time or any kind of mileage, even like you spoke of earlier, for 15 miles, trust me, you're going to know it. And so, but you look at what they have in each one of them. So, you know, if you were going to go camping for some days, we'll call it camping, but if you're going to be out in the land for several days, or you're going to have to go somewhere in the wilderness, 45 pounds wouldn't be that bad. It says it's got a sleeping bag, you know, and it's got some other stuff in there, which you would need. But, you know, you have to, the situation is going to dictate where you're going to carry any of that kind of weight.
I think in terms of your average person, a 45-pound bag is not going to be something that's manageable for them to hike any distance with, but it is that 72-hour solution while you're waiting for responders to come and rescue. Want to comment quickly. This is a legit comment from JC here. So should build the kit yourself if you can. So then you're more familiar with the tools that you have. So I agree. People should do that if they can, but not everybody can do that. But related to this comment, and again, it's a good comment, even someone like us, I dump my bags once a month. And then I put a list in them that's easily retrievable at the top that tells me everything that's in that bag. But the reason I dump it and repack it is to verify that all of the stuff that I expect to be in that bag is in that bag. There's one sitting like right over here. And again, every single month I dump it and I reload it and I go through the list that I store in the bag. It's a good habit to get into is basically what I'm.
Well, you can also check expiration dates if something, you know, also if something came unsealed or broke or any of that kind of stuff. And then it's just being redundant. You should check on that stuff before we leave to go to training or to be deployed or anything like that, including all the radio equipment and everything. Now we also go out to the range and blow stuff up. That's where we test those products. But I had to test every radio, every cord, every power cord, every mic, everything that had to do with radios, everything that we were bringing, every single thing in there, I had to test to make sure it worked, like right before we packed it. Because no matter what, when you get over there, something's not going to work. Right. And if I didn't test it, how do I know it didn't work before we left? And that's exactly what they're going to think. Well, you should have tested it before we left because it probably already broke. If I already tested it and listed it off, then I can say, hey, no, I did check it. And for whatever reason, it doesn't. That's why you do that, you know, and then you become more familiar with your products or whatever you've got in that bag. Sure. I really like the one you have that just pops out and it's all there. That is beautiful. That's a great design because you're not the only one that does that, Chris. It's time to dump this thing because I can't find what I'm looking for right now.
It drives me mad. Cindy will tell you that it upsets me. So check this out. What Randy's discussing is the Jump Medic bag. And so this is built by an active duty paramedic in Oregon. And him and his family are fixing to move to Tennessee or the Carolinas. They want to get away from that Pacific Northwest just because of all the crazy political stuff. But his family, you know, many of them born and raised right there in Portland, Oregon area. But he came up with this bag. And my understanding is that there's other people, especially military contractors, who've provided this type of bag. But there's two zippers. I've got one sitting right over here, and you undo those zippers, and like you see, it folds out into a T, and it's really easy to find everything because it's not, you know, packed up in a bag like you would normally expect.
I would use this bag for other things. I mean, I'm sure you can buy the bag separately. Stacking other supplies in there would also be a very good idea. If you had 2 or 3 of these bags, you could really.
So I don't know if you can buy it from him, but he sent us the bag. And we used it and we showed it to people, and it's a really good setup. Here's another thing I like about this guy, by the way. He says, you know, you see these bags from people, medical bags, and it says 500 pieces. And out of the 500 pieces, 400 of them are Band-Aids. Yeah. And they just put it in there to try and make the number sound bigger. He said, I give you whatever the number is, 40 or 50 Band-Aids. Why do you want to pay me for Band-Aids? Go to Walmart and buy 500 Band-Aids for a song and a dance sort of thing, right?
That's right.
But I said to him, is there any chance you could send me a second bag with no medical stuff in it for the very purpose that you just mentioned, to put other gear in that bag? they're not huge bags, but they're super convenient. Well, as you can see, they're very convenient. A good comment here by effed up here. I prepped because USA is 37 trillion in debt and the printing press go burr. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, that could, the roof
you just
could
never
collapse
know.
on that.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, my point to that bag is, I don't know. He probably didn't make this specifically, right? He's getting this bag from somewhere else, I would imagine.
So I want to say that somewhere on the site, and if memory serves me right, he's got his design patented, but I'm not sure what the patent covers, because I have seen other bags that you can unzip, but this one, the centerpiece Velcros in place, and then you have a zipper on each side, right?
Yeah.
So either way, it's a great solution. You undo 2 zippers, pull the Velcro, and boom, you got everything ready to go. Kevin,
I like this. I like this comment.
Yeah, this is a great comment. Put together a kit, go walking 1 mile around your block with it. 100%. What a great way to tell, well, look at Kevin's previous comment and couldn't agree more. Ounces equals pounds, pounds equals pain.
That's right.
So good advice given there for sure. All right. So moving on, we're running long tonight, but this is kind of an important subject, so I don't mind spending some extra time on this. So you've probably heard me say countless times, Randy, I hate the whole water treatment purification BS. Yeah. When I first acquired Survival Dispatch, we ended up we were sent all of these products from all these different companies, everything from a straw up to stainless steel units that sit on your countertop. And every last one of them did a terrible job, to the point where I said to all of them, yeah, you know what? I'm not putting my name on this. And it was really frustrating. So for a period of time, a couple of years, people would say, hey, we'd like to send you our, products for you to test for water filtration / purification. I'd say, no, I'm not interested. Last time I did it, I was so upset at the time it wasted that I'm just not going to do it. Yeah. Until we got approached by Sawyer. And number one, they're made in Tampa, Florida. It's 100% American-owned company, American designed, American made. They've got the tightest 0.1 micron filters on the market, and they do a phenomenal job. So we ended up last year saying, okay, well, we'll have a look at them and we'll go with it. I can't say enough good things about the Sawyer products. These are really, really decent people. It's family owned. They donate water around the world. So this guy here, I really like this deal here where you can screw it onto a bottle and then pour your water out. They also have bladders, basically bags that have that type of connection on them. There's one right there, as you can see. Make sure you have a way to filter / purify water, because technically you can survive 3 days without water. But in reality, every person I know who's been forced to go 2 days will tell you that they lost their mental faculties and did not make good decisions. And they highly recommended, don't try and prove the theory of lasting 3 days without water. So shameless plug for Sawyer. They don't pay us anything. I don't have an affiliate, relationship with them. They typically advertise with us in Q4, and we promote their product at that time of year. But right now I'm not getting paid anything. I'm promoting the product because it's a good company, it's a good product, and it does exactly what it says. So the next one here, we have worked with Nutrient Survival in the past where they have paid us, to showcase their products. And I would do it again in a New York Minute, to be quite frank. So Randy knows Eric Christensen, the CEO of Nutrient Survival. He was an Army Ranger, a West Point grad, and he's been in the food industry for 30 years. And of all the, prepper food companies out there, they have the highest quality, bar none. I can tell you, we've been sent all of this stuff, and, garbage in, garbage out. In other words, when you eat garbage products, garbage food, you will get very poor personal performance as a direct result of it. I don't have an affiliate relationship with them. Would love to promote their products again at some point in the future, but this is much like Sawyer, where this is as good as it gets, and this is their Amazon store. And you know what? I'll put some of these links in the article on Substack for anybody who's interested. Next one up, of course, Carnival is one of our current sponsors. we've already, you know, beaten it to death. But I am really excited about this product. And I also, I want to thank everybody in the Survival Dispatch audience who's been buying this product. They've noticed an increase in traffic and more sales. And I can get behind this product for a whole bunch of reasons. It's an American owned company. It's 100% American raised beef, chicken, and pork, no mRNA, no antibiotics. This is the real deal. And I like the fact that they didn't season it, which means we can all season it however we want. I also like the fact that it's raw. So they were telling me, Randy, remember those like the high-end ramen noodles that had meat chunks in it that were really tiny?
Yeah.
So they told me the reason that those meat chunks are so small is because when you cook meat and you freeze dry it, and then you cook it again a second time, it gets so brutal to chew on that they had to put it in those little small pieces. The reason that they leave, this is raw meat that's been you know.
Well, these were good sized chunks of chicken. You know what I mean? Oops, this way. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not cooked. So
yes,
when you reconstitute it with water, it's raw meat, just like you get raw meat from the butcher, and then you season it however you want. So carnivalt.com, eat meat, use that code and you'll get 10% off. And we're only announcing that every so often because this is not a high margin product. They don't make a ton of margin on this. 10% discount is actually a pretty big deal to their bottom line, but we're trying to help them get some traction. This company was recently launched and there's tons of uses for their product. But moving on from there, here's a water bob that I mentioned earlier. So what's crazy, you can see here, it says last purchased April 13th, 2024, because we have a few of them. And right now it's $34.94. The last time that we bought these, Randy, they were $20.
Yeah.
So
of course,
the price has definitely gone up, but they're worth their weight in gold. So for anybody who's not familiar with the water bob, this will hold 100 gallons of water in your bathtub. Comes with that hand pump. You can use it, you know, put a bit in the back tank in your commode so you can flush it. You could cook with it. If you trust your tap water or well water, you could drink it as well. But
just get you a Swiss or whatever that thing was.
Well, for $35.
Oh yeah, that's good, man.
This is a must-have. Again, a hurricane for us doesn't typically knock out our water, Randy, but Hurricane Matthew, when we got whacked by that, I think that was like 2016, 2017. We had a water main break beside a sewer main on the main road into our small town here, and it contaminated the entire water supply. We went 3 weeks with no water, and that sucked. I mean, it was worse than not having power. Next up, of course, you need power. So we recently did a review on this, and this power station is the lowest price per watt hour LifePo 4 batteries we've ever tested before. So this has an 1800 watt inverter. It can peak up to 3600 watts for like 7 seconds when you put a load under it. But this one also has a connection where you can jump your vehicle for it. And the battery on this is 1548 watt hours. But the next one that you'll see a video coming on it this week, this guy here, you can see the price $999. It's 2400 watts instead of 1800 watts. So it's got more power coming out of it. And it's 1462 watt hours. So about the same size, pardon me, for the LifePo battery. But here's the deal. Amazon Prime Day next month in July is the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. And this product's going on special for $599.
Oh, wow. Boy,
and
gotta jump on it then.
So you're talking 31.8 cents per watt hour, if memory serves me right. Don't get me wrong, the VTO Man power station is a really good deal. I tested it for several months. I was really happy with it. We only put about 10% of products that we review on our channel, and we test a ton of power stations. I've got this guy sitting beside me right here, and let me switch cameras for a second, just because this one might show a little bit better. So this is one heck of a deal when they put it on for $599. Anybody who's looking for a power station that's, not necessarily entry level, this would be one step above entry level. It's got 13 ports on it. It's got a whole bunch of USB-A's, USB-C's. It's got 120 volt ACs on it. Mark your calendar, July 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, $599 instead of $999. You don't even need a coupon. You can just go buy it for that price on Amazon Prime Day. Best deal I've ever seen on a power station with these.
That's almost half price. Shoot.
Just an incredible deal. And again, we test a ton of power stations, and that one passed with flying colors. Next up, I want to share this. So if you go to survivaldispatch.com and you go up here to the connect menu and the first link, primitive skills for modern times, you can get our PDF book here. Jason Roberts wrote it. And this is a really good ebook that has a ton of information as far as, again, we're back to the more you know, the less you need. It's a great read. It's a great resource to have on hand. For those people who go to survivaldispatchnews.com, that's our Substack. If you sign up as a Guardian for $7.99 a month or $75 a year, you get 2.5 months free when you sign up annually. You get all of our Survival Dispatch Insider magazines that we normally charge $9.99 for. You get all 37 of them plus some additional checklists. Included in that's a 228-page survival guide that's for free. It's included in your membership as a Guardian. But even if you don't sign up, or for a paid account, that's okay. Sign up for a free account on our Substack, because that way you get our Saturday watch guide. We know you're not being notified by CommiTube and some other platforms when we publish content. So the weekly watch guide goes out every Saturday, has everything we publish for the week with links. It's completely free. You get our daily SITREPs, excluding all the source URLs, which our paying members get. And if the shit really hits the fan, we put out a threat matrix every Sunday morning for the top 3 threats that America's facing each week. And that's for paying members, except for when there's something really bad going on, we blast it out to everybody for free, because it's more important that people have that information than, paying for a membership. So I've got an article, or not an article, post here that was shared by Dale. So Dale is in our private Signal chat. He's a Guardian. This is absolutely brutal. And for those of you who are offended by profanity, fair warning, there's profanity in this video. But Dale sent this to the Signal chat. I clicked on it, I watched it, shaking my head. And while I was on X, I started scrolling and I came across 3 more videos from other people just like this, Randy, inside of about 5 minutes. We've got this explosion of mental illness that's now ratcheting up to a whole new level of encouraging people to Luigi somebody that they don't like, meaning kill them, assassination attempts against Donald Trump. Listen to this 30-second video. This is bad.
You can just kill ICE agents. You know that? You can just kill them. You don't have to hold your phone in their face and ask people when their birthday is and ask people what their name is and then try to find wherever they end up in Los Angeles. You can kill them. This isn't about social media clout anymore. This isn't about video. This isn't about the phone. This is about get a gun and start killing ICE agents. They are deputized corrections officers. Kill them.
I don't know if you want to take a swing at that or not.
I would say, hey, if she's feeling froggy, this is the best way to get dead right here. Go, start trying to kill federal officers. You're going to find yourself dead real quick. You may get 1 or 2, but the reality is, and, this is the kind of stuff that they're putting out. This is what we're talking about here. Whether it's the Democrat politicians that are saying kind of the same thing without being so bold, but they are telling them to go out and confront them and, ask them where the gangs are out. This kind of thing, you should be that. Whoever that woman was should be charged. She should be found. She'd be arrested. And she'd be charged for putting that kind of stuff out there. You know what I mean? Because it's not getting us anywhere. This isn't helping. And, the violence has ramped up for what? For nothing really, because those people are doing their job. The people that they're running down are here illegally. They're committing a crime and they have to go. Well, otherwise it's not just a slap in the face to all of us, but certainly the immigrants that have come here the right way, which is what we want and which it should be. So trying to soften that to say that we should leave them here now that the last administration dumped 20 million in,
minimum.
Yeah, no, we've got to do something about it. And that's what these ICE agents are for. And if you're going to go get in their way and you're going to start trying to kill them, expect to, like the Florida sheriff we saw, expect them to notify your next of kin where you can collect your remains.
That's right. Yeah, that's I can't remember his name, Wayne something in Brevard County. I want to address this for thermal scan.
Yeah.
So watts versus watt hours. So watts is how much electricity the inverter cranks out. So your fridge is probably 600-700 watts, maybe a little bit more, just like a light bulb is 60 watts. If you were to take a device, for example, that draws a few thousand watts, because let's say it's an electric heater, and you plugged it into a power station that's rated for 1800 watts or 2400 watts, it's going to trip the inverter and it's going to stop providing power. Watt hours is storage. It's not how much power it can crank out, it's how much power it can store. So just for easy numbers for math purposes, if you have a battery that's rated 1000 watt hours and you have a 100-watt light bulb, that power station has enough battery capacity to run the 100-watt light bulb for 10 hours. So watt hours is basically how much you've got stored in your battery capacity, and wattage is what the output is from the inverter. So for example, the VTO man power station I showed, 1800 watt inverter. Okay. The other one, the Andes that I showed, 2400 watt, means that you can run a lot more stuff simultaneously from the power station because it's got 2400 watts of AC output power. And if you go down to the little small ones, we showed one from Dabson not too long ago. I want to say it was like a 600 watt inverter. And you plug in, for example, a hair dryer, and it trips it instantly because the hair dryer is 1900 watts. You're not going to run most fridges off a 600 watt inverter. So wattage is the output for AC. Watt hours is the battery capacity / storage. Next one here, we got a question from Knottsville. Does anyone use the EMP shield and is worth the cost? So we are the only people who have actually tested EMP shield, and we did it the right way. So the only reason this says 360 volts is to keep the keyboard warriors at bay. We hit a test bed with 400,000 volts. So we had a 20,000 volt transformer, and we had 20 capacitors, 20,000 volts each. And the way a capacitor works is you charge it with the transformer, and then it discharges all at once. So 20,000 volts times 20 capacitors, it was 400 volts. And we showed it online, and not using a meter or anything like that where people could argue. So every centimeter of gap that you can jump an electrical arc requires 30,000 volts. So we clearly set up this big gap between two wires. We sparked it up, and the EMP is a pulse, right? So when you use capacitors that they charge up to 20,000 volts and then boom, they all discharge at the same time. It's virtually the same thing that an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, does, whether it's generated from a nuclear warhead or a CME generated by, the sun. So coronal mass ejection. So here's the deal. We created a test bed. We had a dedicated ground rod connected to a box, a panel. We had the EMP shield connected to the panel and the ground rod. And then in our little network, we put LED lights, LED light controllers, thermostat, and a bunch of other devices. And we hit this far away from those devices. We hit that network with 400,000 volts. And the EMP shield was 8 feet that direction where the panel was, and every single thing survived. And we hit the test bed over 100 times back to back. So internals of an EMP shield is a substance called metal oxide varistor. And metal oxide varistor has infinite, what's the word I'm looking for? Ohms, resistance. So in other words, and then it goes to infinite attraction. So what does that mean in just plain English? It means that when the test bed got hit with the 400,000 volts and we were 6 inches away from the sensitive devices, that the attraction level of that metal oxide varistor is so strong that it drew the entire electromagnetic pulse to it instead of damaging the other products. So this is where it gets crazy. We took the EMP shield off after going through this 100 tests and everything survived fine. Not only did it smoke everything on the test bed, it coupled onto the wiring in Steve's garage wall, went across his house and up an entire story and smoked his fridge in his kitchen. So it's extremely dangerous stuff. So dangerous that we thought, okay, we're going to do this with 800,000 volts. So the test bed went outdoors, and instead of 20 capacitors at 20,000 volts, we had 40 capacitors. Steve was 25 feet away, standing on a thick chunk of rubber with a 25-foot fiberglass rod that he could reach over and hit the switch on the transformer, which shot 20,000 volts into 40 20,000 volt capacitors. And the electricity came right back to him and smoked him and hit him. And it dazed him. And at that point in time, we said, you know what? We're not going to go any further than this because somebody's going to get really, really hurt. But at the end of the day, we are the only ones who've done this. We're the only ones who put a video out on this. Go to survivaldispatch.com, scroll down. There's the video right there. It's close to the top. You can watch the whole thing. Nobody else has done anything like it but us because we're that guy. So anyway, now that we got that out of the way, let's do our conflicted question and wrap this thing up, Randy. We ran double our normal time. Normally it's a 1 hour podcast, but one of your friends tells you that he cannot live in this world anymore. So post-apocalyptic scenario. And he has confessed to you that he wants to commit suicide, talks with his wife and kids who are still alive and depend on him, seem to do nothing to change his mind. The children are too young and his wife too depressed to be of any help with this situation. As the leader of your group, what would you do with this member and his family? Randy, go ahead and take a run at that.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is pray with them, but that's not where it's going to end. I'm going to pray for them because this is a pretty dire situation. And since this is post-apocalyptic, I mean, what are the odds you're going to be able to isolate this guy in what's called, suicide watch? Maybe you can. And that would be a good idea. But I think it's more of you're going to have to think outside the box and you're going to have to kind of come up. I personally would think, again, I'm going off of the folks I hang around with. I'm going to find something very important that this guy needs to do, some sort of task, and not that he can do in 30 minutes or even tomorrow. It's going to be kind of a long, drawn out thing where he needs an important task to do and that only he can do it. Right. And that we really, really need him to do this. And generally, I think that would be the way to go with that. Of course, it's going to be situation dependent and, you would kind of make your decisions based on his reactions and however all that went. But I think that's along the lines that I would look at is finding something important for him to do and giving him purpose and direction.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought of that. What a great solution, Randy. I can't top that whatsoever. And so I'm not even going to offer my pre-kid because you came up with the best solution, really. Have him do something that only he can do that's really important. Well said.
Thank you.
Great solution. So anybody else out there in the audience who wants to share their answer, we want to hear it. You can put it in the comment section down below, whatever platform you're on, or you can go to our Substack, click on today's SITREP for this video and leave your answer there. We want to hear it for sure. Somebody asked, I just lost the comment here, a bunch of stuff just scrolled by. The power station that's going to be a killer deal at $599, the Andes 1500. I just put the link to the Amazon listing for it. So it's $9.99 right now. I put it in all the live chats. But July 8th, it'll go for $5.99, 31.8 cents per watt hour for LifePo 4 with 6,000 charge cycles, which you can think in terms of that's like a 15-year lifespan. So 2,400 watt inverter, just under 1,500 watt hours of storage, $599. That's a heck of a deal.
That
so
is.
it just, if you click the link that I sent to the chat and bookmark it. So Ty's got a great question. Let's wrap up on this one, Randy. Ty Nelson wants to know if you have a brand of socks that you recommend. I just buy them at Shepler's, whatever boot socks are handy, but is there any particular brand that you like, Randy?
You know, I don't know that I really particularly have a brand, you know what I mean? But it also depends. Like in the Army, they were all wool socks, and I just bought a ton from the BX or the PX, you know, went into the where you got your military clothing. But it is a good question because there are some good quality socks out there. So that's really what you're looking for. Is it a quality sock? So if you wear on your foot, that's the main focus of it. But some of the things we're also talking about that, you know, you may have to think out of the box and use also for Lent or whatever have you. But and you can use socks for all kinds of things. But I would say stick with wool and then find a quality sock. And they're not like Golden Toe. You know, they have good socks, or I think that's what the name of it is. And then you know, there's another sock I just can't for whatever reason. Well, the name is eluding me right now because I'm sometiming it right. Sometimes I have.
Well, I was born in cowboy boots, so I always wear, you know, boot socks, like I said,
yes,
Shepler's sort of thing. But at the end of the day, if you're hiking, you got to get home, like in an SHTF situation, wool is the way to go. It doesn't hold water like cotton does, and they can get damp. I'm not saying that they don't have any water exposure, but they also dry really fast when you put them
a lot quicker.
Yeah, definitely a lot quicker. So that's it for tonight. I think John Martin and Ted Yoho, that they'll have an episode tomorrow for y'all on our Survival Dispatch News channel. John Wheaton will be back on Sunday evening. He's got a pre-recorded episode, and then Randy and I and probably Jeff MD will be back on Monday evening and all at the regular time, 7 p.m. Eastern. But that's it. Got a really cool closing video for tonight, by the way. But between now and next time we see you on Monday, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America.
God bless America.
And enjoy the closing video.
We don't